What's up my loves, my name is Paige, this is Pages with Paige, and today we're going to be doing my March wrap up. I apologise in advance for this and the fact that it's going to get progressively redder. I'm currently having an allergic attack to, I think, the dust from our heating system, which we have finally started to turn back on. So I will progressively have sneezing fits throughout this video and my face is just going to get redder and redder. I apologise. That's just the way it goes. I have taken antihistamines. We'll see if it helps. I cannot believe that March is done. A quarter of this year is already gone. What the hell? But let's dive into the stats of what I did read in March. I read a total of 14 books, which equated to 4,084 pages, which worked out to be roughly 132 pages a day, or 292 pages per book. So I did read a lot of smaller things in March. I felt like my concentration just wasn't there, and that's okay. I don't feel like I'm in as much of a life slump, and I'm just sort of figuring things out and as we go, and my reading has sort of been reflective of this transitionary state that I'm in. Still happy with the fact that I read over 100 pages a day. I would like my average per book just to bump up, but I will explain why it has been taken down as we get to it. My average rating was a 4.32, which is the highest it's been this year, and I picked up a lot of good books. I didn't have any real duds during the month, so that is always fantastic. In terms of genres, I read 5 fantasy, 2 paranormal, and 7 sci-fi. For formats, I read 5 ebooks, 3 audio ebook combinations, and 6 physical audiobooks. For my age range, I read 7 adult, 4 YA, and 3 middle grade. In terms of rating, I gave 4 books 5 stars, 2 books 4.5 stars, 7 books 4 stars, and 1 book 3.5 stars. I read 2 standalones. I started 4 new series, and 8 of them were continuations of series. Some of these are in the same series though. For my big book, I read Discovery of Witches, which was 688 pages, and my smallest was Saga issue volume 56, which was 32 pages. My listening hours was 31.2, which is the lowest it has been this year, and I feel like it makes sense. I still love reading physically and audibly, but there was just a few ebooks that didn't have audiobooks to go along with them, and then just naturally it's progressed that I'm reading a bit more mix. But I do want to be getting back to having my audiobooks because I just feel like so much more relaxed. I had 1 reread, and one thing that I forgot to mention in my February wrap up, which I wanted to, is actually the publication dates. So I had 1 book that was from 1943, 4 books that were from 1990 to 1999, 2 books that were from 2005 to 2010, 2 books that were from 2011 to 2015, and 5 2022 releases. So that was my statistics for what I read in March. I was participating in Mel's Roll of Reads and had so much fun. I completed all 4 challenges that I needed to do for that and had a lot of fun in the process. So let's dive into the actual books themselves. So the first thing I read was The Gremlins by Roald Dahl. This was a 56-page ebook and I gave this a 4-star. I really enjoyed seeing Roald Dahl's first work. This was originally created to be a film for Walt Disney. I don't think it ever actually went ahead, but Roald Dahl came up with the concept of these little gremlins that make mischief, and it had a really lovely message behind it. The ending is in the way that I would go just looking at it from a modern perspective. There's a little bit of concern, but I loved the fact that it addressed mental health issues with pilots in the RAF, and yeah, it was really quick and easy, very cute, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I was praying that it would go smoothly because with some of the older texts there are some themes that are not ideal, but this one was just a discussion of war. I really enjoyed it, so I definitely eventually do want to pick up a copy, but we'll see how that goes. And for Gremlins, that was the Roll of Reads prompt, which is the first book by my favourite author. So this was actually Roald Dahl's debut book, and that was actually Mel's challenge for my advent calendar. So just up the top here, I've got to put my little corgi on. The intense look of concentration. There we go. And then the next book that I read was Jurassic Park by Michael Criden. This was for Mel Recommends prompt. So this was actually also fulfilling the Advent Challenge, as Mel recommended this book specifically for me, so I decided to read it during her Roll of Reads month and tick off this prompt. So let me grab my corgi and then we can talk about the book. So just down the bottom here. And there's corgi. It's so cute! Ah! Back to Jurassic Park. I gave this a 4 stars. I felt like the science in it was done in a way that someone that's not science-minded could understand the basic premise, and then if you wanted to go further into the science, there was opportunities for that to be explored without dampening those that don't understand a lot of scientific terms. So I had a lot of fun reading this, and it really just, it sucks you in from the get-go. I then watched the movie with Ash, as it's one of his favorite movies, and he's procrastinated reading the book. Don't know if he ever will, because he loves the movie so much that he doesn't want to see the differences. The ending is probably the most significant one. For me, I like the way that they did it in the book better just because of my attitude towards that particular character. There were obviously a few creative liberties taken that they would not have been able to do in film or in book form, wouldn't work as well, but I enjoyed both separately and as a whole product. So yeah, I'm very surprised. I've gone and picked up the second one because I do want to continue on with this series. I think it was a lot of fun and it just looks at things from different perspectives. I then saw, like 2 days ago, this giant mosquito that flew into someone's house in Argentina, and I was like, no, do not do anything with that bug aside from squash it. There's a lot of interesting takes, a lot of philosophical concepts that are also discussed, which was kind of interesting, and it's one of those that I can see that how this would be a 5-star book for others, but for me it was just a great fun ride and I really enjoyed the reading experience of it. It wasn't taxing to read, which I thought it might have been. Next, I read The Sickness by Ka Applegate. This is the 29th book in the Animal series and I gave this a 4 stars. We're back in Cassie's perspective and I just really enjoyed the narrative that's following along with her in her non-silly storylines when they're following through and actually making it like a meaningful thing. I find that hers are some of the best, but it's either all or nothing with her books. So glad this was an all. I had a lot of fun getting to see her perspective and the conversations that are starting to evolve as we are 29 books into the series, and just looking at the ethics behind things is becoming a little bit more predominant and I'm just really enjoying it. Next up, I read Never Fade by Alexandra Bracken. This is the second in the Darkest Mind series and I gave this a 4.5 stars. It was chosen by Spin the Llama and I really enjoyed this. The way that book 1 ended, I was apprehensive about continuing on with the series as I wasn't quite sure how they were going to make it all shape up and have such thick books for a YA dystopian actually feel relevant and keep the story progressing. I feel like this was not a middle book. It was actually laying the foundations to be able to explore our characters deeper, to make them feel heavier, to present them in a different light and just explore their characters a little bit more. There was one character shift that was very 180, but aside from that, all the character development felt very authentic and it was just really cool seeing the progression of what's actually going on in this world. I liked the fact that we weren't in camps the entire time and that things have expanded and we're seeing more of the world. That was a great surprise and I'm actually really eager to continue on with the series and see how it goes because the ending of this was very interesting. Next up, I read The Reunion by Ka Applegate and this is the 30th in the Animal series, and so obviously I enjoyed book 29. I wanted to continue on. I also gave this a 4 stars as we are following Marcus and his relationship dynamics when they're following through with this particular arc is just heartbreaking and wonderful. I don't want to say too much about what this one's actually about as I feel like it is spoilers for books earlier, just knowing that Marcus's perspective, we're usually traveling in the same vein of story arc, and I'm really enjoying that. Next up we have Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, and this I gave 4 stars, but it was like a high 4 stars. I had so much fun with this. The original premise was that it was a gang of ragtag people, a reluctant fairy godmother, and a chicken possessed by a demon. And that was the one line that I had request for NetGalley. So when I received this, I decided that I wanted to read it before it came out in April, and oh my god, it was just so much fun. It was taking tropes of fairy tales that we know and love and sort of giving them a little bit more oomph. I really enjoyed the magic that's in this world and how the Dust Witch, the fairy godmothers, how Mara, her own abilities, bring all of it together, and it was just really cute and lovely. So I had a great time reading it, and even though it was short, it still felt like a complete narrative. There wasn't anything missing from it, and it was just a whole lot of fun. Next up, I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Lynn and gave this a 4 stars. This is a beautifully written novel based off the Chinese mythology of Chang'e, the moon goddess. Seeing our protagonist come into their own, the way that it all unfolds was beautifully written. I felt like there were a few things that lagged, and occasionally it felt like trope bingo, where every sort of thing that could happen in a YA one does, but overall it was so beautifully done, and I had a enjoyable time just progressing with our character and seeing how she learns about herself, the politics, and the world was just really, really interesting. I did read this for my Facebook group, the Library of the Unread, and so there was daily sections to read, and I felt like that was a really enjoyable way of doing it, so then I could discuss with everyone as we were going through it. I know that this is probably not going to be everyone's cup of tea. It is a little bit, it's not even whimsical fantasy because it is still quite heavily based in military fantasy, but I can just see that the tropes might not be to everyone's liking, but I found it very just easygoing, and that was what I needed this month. Then I had a panic attack because I realized that the Magical Gear Up edition I read Never Fade earlier, and that was actually the book I was going to use with Daughter of the Moon Goddess to be able to fulfill my character prompt. So for that, I could have read House of Sky and Breath, I could have read Sky Beyond the Storm, I could have read Morningstar, which was one of the options to read this month, but I didn't. So I read Shadow Kiss by Rochelle Mead, which is the 3rd in the Vampire Academy series. And oh lordy, this series just, it's not exceptionally well written. It is very YA, it is very tropey, and you feel that. There isn't anything that buffers it like Daughter of the Moon Goddess. But I just enjoy this so much, so I gave it a 4 stars. I feel like our character development is actually starting to progress, and I'm really curious as there was quite a significant shift in what's happening for the rest of the books. So I'd be curious to see how that all shapes up. It keeps you invested, it's very easy to read, and it is a lot of fun if you're happy to just roll with those tropes. I ended up picking this up and just had a great time with it. I was making a mockery of this cover the entire month. Ash can replicate this face pretty well. Occasionally when you're working with books and just chatting with people, the experiences outside of it can also just make it that much more of an enjoyable experience for you. Then for Tarrying Through Time, I read the 3rd City Watch series, which is Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett, and I gave this 5 stars. I adore these characters with my entire heart and soul. I don't find that the world is complicated anymore. It all sort of just flows in the way that it's meant to. I feel like Jingo's going to shake things up as we're going outside of Ankh-Morpork, which will be very interesting to see, but for this one, it was just a treat. I had so much fun with it, and just Terry subverting tropes just fill me with joy. So for that, I gave it 5 stars, and I'm actually so excited to continue on with the rest of the series and eventually continue on with the rest of Terry Pratchett's works, as these characters have just nestled their way into my heart, and I really appreciate that fact. They're all sort of like Sherlock-y styled mysteries, but very low-key and with a very diverse range of species that are involved in the process. Then the final book I needed to read for Mel's Roll of Reads was Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, and this was a protagonist over 30. And this was for the Bookstar read-along for starting this series, and we will be doing alternating. So the next time we'll read one in the series will be May. Goddamn. I gave this a 4.5, and after chatting with Amy for the discussion, which I'll leave linked below as it was on my channel, the temptation to bump into a 5 is strong, but there were just a few sections that left me going, okay, I don't know if this is spot on, leaving me with that 5-star feeling. I adore all of the characters. Not a single one of these irritates me profusely. I think my main hesitations was with Diane. At the beginning, she doesn't want to use magic, and it is told from the perspective of a witch, a vampire, and a demon. Like, they are the only perspectives you see. Humans are not allowed to know about these creatures, so it's them telling the story to us. Her reluctance to use magic, I know, is based in trauma, and I would totally understand not wanting to use it, except for the fact that she fucking does. And it just nitpicked at me that little bit, because I was like, you're gonna say, no, I'm not doing any witchy stuff, no witchy stuff, no, no, no. Oh, there's a book in my hand because I desperately needed it. Like, come on. I understand that, and it definitely gets explained later on why she might have been hesitant and has that denial. I fully appreciate where the backstory goes to support her in that decision of not wanting to use magic, but it was just like, oh, that's very hypocritical until you get to the point where it's explained. I loved Matthew, I loved Yazabo, I loved Marth, I loved Marcus. Just every one of these characters just filled me with joy. Like I said, the only reason it wasn't a 5-star was one, her hypocrisy in the beginning, and occasionally some of the scenes felt really uncomfortable, but not in a way that was intentional, I suppose. And it left me going, ugh, okay, ugh. So for that, 4.5. So excited to continue on with this series. The ending of this, for some, there was discussion that it just, you know, teetered out and it wasn't how they wanted it to end, but for me, spot on. I am very, very engaged to pick up the next one, and I can't wait for May. So then we hit a snag, and I was like, Morningstar is on my TBR. I have the audiobook for it. I have Arrow to the Moon by Emily X. Alpan, but I don't have an audiobook for it because it's an arc. I can't be fucked reading House of Sky and Breath because it's fucking enormous. So there were the 3 reads that I wanted to move to next, and I just couldn't. I got very stumped, and I read 80 pages of Morningstar and have decided to soft DNF it for the moment. I will come back to it and I will finish off the series, but I just didn't have the emotional spoons to deal with that this month. I was scrolling Hoopla looking at the graphic novels and comics and manga, and Saga issue 55 was out. This is 48 pages, so it's essentially the chapter of the volumes. Oh my lord. I was not ready for this to be back in my life, and I'm so happy that it was. So I read 55, gave it 5 stars, like where they're going with the plot after the end of volume 9, which hurt me so deeply. I'm here for it. Whatever they do can do no wrong. So I know not everyone's gonna love it as much because it does take a shift, but I'm totally here for it. There is a lot of stuff that goes into this series, so be warned, check trigger warnings, and yeah. And then because I was in my slump and I couldn't focus on anything, I just wanted to play The Sims, but I didn't want to listen to the Morningstar audiobook because I needed to pay attention. I ended up picking Blue Bloods by Melissa Dela Cruz, which is the first in the Blue Blood series. And I gave it a 3.5. Not as good as I remember. As I had read this as a teenager and really enjoyed it, like height of my want to be a vampire phase, found this, loved it, never continued on with the series. Rereading it as an adult is, not being in a vampire phase, very different experience, but still enjoyed it. It was fun and easy to read. The characters got a long way to go for development, but we'll see. And just the intrigue behind having the different players involved in the politics of the world was actually really interesting. It's not a quality class literature. I don't feel like I had a high quality reading month, but it was still high ratings because I didn't have the expectations that it was going to be something that was going to blow me out of the water month. I just had a lot of fun with it. And then I was procrastinating and I didn't actually read anything for the last 2 days of the month, but before then I read Saga issue 56 and 57 and gave these both 5 stars because god damn, these characters have my heart and soul, and I'm very excited to see. And I've been checking Hoopla consistently for the next few issues. It's okay, I'm not hurting deeply in my soul, it's fine. So I'm counting these issues as I read them because I'm not going to read the whole volume apparently. I'm just going to read each issue as it comes out. So technically that was counting 3 series continuations, even though the volume itself isn't out and I haven't read the entire volume, which I would usually count as 1 book. And also because Gremlins and then the Saga issues were so short, that's where my pages per book has dropped significantly, but at the same time I made those choices to not read something else and read those instead, so I can't be mad at that. This plus a whole lot of ebooks what I read in March, and honestly I had a pretty good reading month. I enjoyed everything that I read and I felt like I've got to some things that I'd been procrastinating a little bit and started some new things that I'm excited to continue on with. Let me know in the comments what was your favorite read of March, and did you read anything that you know a lot of people won't vibe with, but it was just right for your vibes? If you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video.